special welcome to you, the learner. I want you to imagine stumbling upon a dusty, typewritten manuscript from, like, the mid-1990s. So you're flipping through the pages and you're reading these incredibly detailed descriptions of mind control devices, global pandemics engineered for compliance, and, well, massive 3D holograms being projected into the sky. But as you read further, you realize the author wasn't writing fiction. I mean, he was writing a warning. And today, there's actually a growing number of people who are looking at the news and claiming that this exact script is, playing out line by line right outside our windows.
The source material we are examining today, it presents this massive, intricate tapestry. It really attempts to weave together everything from historical anxieties to bleeding-edge technology. It's basically a grand unified theory trying to explain literally everything chaotic happening in our world right now.
And that is exactly our mission for this deep dive. We are unpacking an article by Luis B. Vega detailing a concept known as Project Bluebeam. So to understand the architecture, we have to start with the architect. The source anchors this entire theory on this really tragic, mysterious figure named Serge Monast. He was a French-Canadian journalist writing in the mid-1990s, and the text notes he was an active member of the Social Credit Party of Canada.
And, that political affiliation is actually a crucial piece of context for his worldview.
How so?
Well, the social credit movement was heavily focused on distributing financial power locally. They were intensely skeptical of centralized international banking. So if someone is already predisposed to distrust large centralized institutions, it's a very short conceptual leap to suspecting a coordinated New World Order.
Okay, let's unpack this, because reading through the source, Monast took that suspicion to a monumental level. I mean, in 1994, he published a work simply titled Project Bluebeam, which was followed by another called Le Protocole de Toronto, or 6.6.6. Yeah, his core claim was that a Masonic group, which the text repeatedly refers to as Luciferian rulers, or just 6.6.6, they were gathering the world's most powerful leaders to install a one-world leader explicitly linked to the biblical Antichrist.
And the emotional weight of the source material really hinges on the severe personal costs that Monast allegedly paid for making these claims. The text really paints him as a martyr.
It gets pretty dark.
It details that by 1995 and 1996, the Canadian police were actively hunting him. He was charged with involvement in, quote, networks of prohibited information.
Which is wild, because the author heavily compares that 1990s charge to today's crackdowns on misinformation. They frame Monast as an early casualty in this long-running war on free speech, but the cost went far beyond just jail time. The source describes how Monast homeschooled his two children, but because of his beliefs and his publications, the Canadian state forcibly removed them from his home. Yeah, they made them wards of the state to ensure they received a standard public education.
I mean, losing your children to the very government you were trying to expose that is the ultimate nightmare scenario for any dissident.
Absolutely.
And then the text points to his sudden death in December 1996. At just 51 years old, Monast died of a reported heart attack at home the very day after he had been arrested and spent a night in jail.
The timing is definitely something the author leans into. They note that many supporters view his death as highly suspicious, suggesting he was, well, assassinated to silence him. If we accept the text's assertion that there is this incredibly powerful global elite, right, like they're capable of infiltrating governments and silencing journalists, why would they go through such an elaborate theatrical deception, like a fake alien invasion, holograms in the sky? If you have that much power, why not just use traditional economic chokeholds or military might to take over the world?
If we connect this to the bigger picture that Monast paints, the answer is that traditional control simply isn't enough to secure permanent dominance.
What do you mean?
Well, think about it. Physical borders can be redrawn. Economic sanctions can be circumvented. Military occupations, they always breed insurgencies. According to the text, the elite's goal isn't just physical compliance, it is to create a total spiritual vacuum. Monast argued that to achieve an unbreakable worldwide dictatorship, the elites must completely abolish three foundational pillars of human identity. That's all Christian traditional religions, all individual national pride, and the traditional family unit.
So God, country, and family.
The theory asserts that if you violently strip those away, you leave humanity desperate and terrified. And only in that state of absolute spiritual vacuum will people willingly surrender to a single worldwide Luciferian religion.
That sets up the motive perfectly. And that logically transitions us to how the source claims this grand deception is actually going to be executed. Monast outlined Project Bluebeam in 4 highly coordinated steps.
And the first two are entirely about manipulating our physical environment.
Starting with the ground beneath our feet. Step 1 involves the deliberate breakdown of all archaeological knowledge.
The stated goal of this first step is to completely discredit existing religions. And the source claims these elites possess what it calls earthquake weapons.
Yeah, and when I first read Earthquake Weapons, I immediately imagined like a supervillain laser from a comic book. They allegedly induce earthquakes in highly specific, historically significant parts of the world, which primes the canvas for Step 2. Step 2 is projecting gigantic 3D holographic lasers into space. They want to turn the Earth's atmosphere into an inescapable global planetarium show.
The visual illusion described by the source is just overwhelming. We're talking massive holograms appearing in the sky above every nation, accompanied by lasers and synchronized sounds.
And what's the point of the show?
The purpose is to introduce the New World leader, the Antichrist, who manifests visually as a new god to different cultures simultaneously.
Okay, and what does this new god actually say to the world?
According to Monast's blueprint, this figure will broadcast a message that all old scriptures were misunderstood. The hologram will claim that traditional religions are the root cause of human suffering, that they're responsible for turning brother against brother.
So they're the bad guys.
Therefore, all old faiths must be abolished to usher in a new golden age. And the author links these principles directly to ideas proposed by Albert Pike.
The text mentions Pike was a prominent 19th century Freemason, but why is he the blueprint here?
Well, in conspiracy literature, Pike is famous for an alleged letter he wrote in 1871 predicting 3 world wars. The theory claims his writings outline a plan to exhaust humanity through conflict until they finally accept a Luciferian doctrine as the only path to peace.
How could Monast genuinely believe this was an imminent threat back in 1994? I mean, the technology for projecting flawless, synchronized, global 3D holograms into the atmosphere clearly wasn't there. We were barely transitioning from floppy disks to CD-ROMs.
It's a fair point, but the author of the article explicitly acknowledges that technological gap. They state very clearly, quote, "Such technologies did not exist in the 1990s. However, the author asserts that they absolutely do exist now. And this bridges the timeline gap by relying on a foundational trope in conspiracy, circles the belief that the military-industrial complex and the global elite possess highly classified futuristic tools decades before the public is ever allowed to see them."
So Monast wasn't wrong, he was just early.
But the danger of that framing is that it allows the theory to constantly update itself to fit the modern day.
And that update is vital because, a giant laser show in the sky might make you look up, but it won't necessarily make you drop to your knees.
Visual tricks aren't enough to secure unquestioning loyalty.
Here's where it gets really interesting because the deep dive naturally transitions from external illusions to internal mind control. Step 3 takes the physical illusion and makes it intensely psychological.
Step 3 involves establishing a global grid of low-frequency radio waves. The text refers to this as telepathic two-way communication.
I love how the source quotes Monast's 90s terminology. He described devices that could moderate microwave beams at audio frequencies. And the result is that they can broadcast voices directly into a person's brain.
The biological mechanism the text outlines is that these audible signals bypass the ears completely. They stimulate the nervous system or the brain directly, making the voices completely undetectable by anyone standing right next to the targeted person.
Instead of using technology to block the chaotic outside world, the state is bypassing your ears to broadcast customized propaganda directly into your skull. And the author connects this 1990s radio wave grid directly to the modern anxieties we see in the headlines today.
The author draws a straight line from Monast's 90s grid to modern 5G and 7G cell towers. Furthermore, the text links this telepathic grid to the COVID-19 injections. The claim is that the vaccines introduce self-assembling nanobots into the human bloodstream.
The text is arguing that the vaccine delivers the hardware, the nanobots, the 5G tower acts as the router, and your own brain becomes the speaker.
That is the exact mechanism the source is alleging. The ultimate goal of piping these voices into your head is to trick you into believing that this new Antichrist or this new holographic god in the sky is messaging you personally. It is designed to shape your internal beliefs so they perfectly align with the new state-mandated religion.
The text calls it an ecumenical religion. And usually, Ecumenical means promoting unity among different Christian churches. But in this dystopian context, it sounds like it means a forced homogenization, diluting all individual faiths into one bland, controllable super-religion that just worships the state. Which brings us to the grand finale, Step 4, Electronic Supernatural Manifestations.
This is the culmination of the entire project. Visuals in the sky and voices in your head are meant to prime the population for highly coordinated, chaotic events worldwide. The text highlights two primary scenarios for Step 4.
Which are?
A staged alien invasion or a fake divine rapture.
So, projecting a scenario where it literally looks like divine intervention is pulling people into the sky.
Yes. The goal is to deceive Christians, specifically into believing that a divine force, perhaps appearing as good aliens, has arrived to save humanity from a brutal satanic attack.
What's fascinating here is the psychological angle the author emphasizes. It's not just about producing a cool special effect or scaring people with fake flying saucers.
No, the source explicitly states the goal is to induce mass psychological disorder, a global psychosis. The overarching strategy is inducing such profound desperation and cognitive overload that humanity's mental defenses completely collapse.
They just break down.
Right, they will beg for a savior. And the text directly compares this intended state of global panic to the psychology of what it calls the COVID pandemic. They argue that we've already seen a trial run of how quickly people will surrender their freedoms when they are terrified.
But this raises a huge question for you listening. We are sitting here analyzing a text rooted in the 1990s. Why is the author writing about this now? We have to bridge the historical theory to the author's claims that current events, specifically leading up to May 2026, are actively fulfilling Monast's timeline.
The text points to the World Economic Forum partnering with the United Nations and the World Health Organization directing pandemic protocols across entire nations.
Basically all the big global institutions.
Yeah. The author argues this is the exact centralization of global power that Monast warned was necessary for Bluebeam to work. The argument is that the U.S. government is using social media and news leaks to subtly get people talking about an alien invasion.
They are priming the pump, getting the idea of extraterrestrial threats into the cultural subconscious. And then we hit the critical date, May 2026. The text places a huge emphasis on the Pentagon beginning to release classified UFO files at this specific time.
But importantly, the text notes these released files are expected to be mostly 30 to 60 years old and of low quality. They will not be the definitive, high-resolution proof the public expects.
So wait, if the files are low quality and inconclusive, how does the author claim they prove the conspiracy?
That intentional lack of clarity is exactly the point, according to the source. The author argues that this slow drip of mediocre files is a tactic designed to induce plausible deniability. By slowly desensitizing humanity with blurry videos and vague statements, the elite ensure that when the real rapture event happens, people are already psychologically conditioned to accept it.
The text also points to remarks from figures like U.S. General Glenn Van Herk, who famously stated he wouldn't rule out alien or extraterrestrial involvement when discussing unidentified objects.
And the author finds that kind of public candor highly suspicious, because historically, any government personnel hinting at extraterrestrial life would be disciplined, marginalized, or worse. The source alleges that many U.S. scientists linked to advanced craft propulsion and free energy have mysteriously gone missing or been murdered over the decades. So the fact that a general is now allowed to openly speculate about aliens suggests, to the author at least, that the elite are moving into the final stages of prepping the public for the staged event. It attributes public disbelief in Project Bluebeam to cognitive dissonance and institutional brainwashing.
The author compares doubting Bluebeam to how people who question the origins of the COVID virus, what the text calls the Fauci pharmaceutical facade or the Wuhan lab leak, were immediately labeled conspiracy theorists by the mainstream media. The text asserts those lab leak theories are now proven facts, implying that the wild claims of Project Bluebeam will eventually be proven true as well.
And by claiming that official UFO disclosures are just a trick to desensitize us, the theory ensures that any government transparency looks like part of the sinister plot. Think about the logic. If the government fiercely hides UFO data, they are covering up the Bluebeam technology. If the government releases UFO files, they are psychologically prepping us for the Bluebeam event.
So you can't win.
The theory is perfectly insulated from contradiction.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's look at what we've unpacked today. We've explored the incredibly complex architecture of Project Bluebeam as presented in this text. We start with Serge Monast's dire 1990s warnings, his deep distrust of centralized power, and the tragic loss of his family that cemented his status as a martyr.
We walked through the four-step protocol.
Right, destroying the archaeological foundation of our religions with engineered earthquakes, projecting holographic new gods into the sky, broadcasting telepathic voices directly into our nervous systems using 5G and nanobots, and finally, staging a fake alien invasion to induce total mass psychological disorder.
And we've seen how the author connects that 1990s blueprint to modern events, claiming that everything from global pandemic protocols to the May 2026 Pentagon UFO file releases is tangible evidence of the impending New World Order.
Which leaves me with a final provocative thought for you to mull over as we close. The text claims that the New World Order must artificially abolish national identity and the traditional family to force humanity into a single unified world identity. They supposedly need incredibly complex holograms and nanobot mind control to achieve this global unity.
That's the claim.
But think about human history. If an undeniable, world-altering crisis like a genuine alien arrival or something equally massive did actually occur, wouldn't humanity naturally discard its local borders and petty identities to survive together? Do we really need mind control and space lasers to unite in the face of an existential threat? Or is global unity just what we naturally do when the chips are truly down?
A fascinating question that really pits the resilience of human nature against the fear of artificial control.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive, learner. Next time you read in the news and the headlines feel like they were ripped straight from a 1990s sci-fi script, well, you'll know exactly where to look.